Hello, my name is Olga Hakova. I'm an Associate Director at the Global Energy Center. Thank you so much for joining us for Securing Critical Electric Infrastructure Amidst the Energy Transition panel. This panel is part of the 6th Annual Central and Eastern European Energy Conference. I have two reminders before we get started. Please use the hashtag NRGSecurityCEE as you share your thoughts about the conference on Twitter. We'll also have 15 minutes for questions from the audience at the end of the session, so please submit your questions through the Q&A function on Zoom, and I'll try to get to as many of those questions as possible in the end. Electricity security is the new frontier when we talk about energy security and we have these discussions. As countries transition to less carbon-intensive sources of electricity, system operators and owners face a number of ongoing challenges: electrification of services, growing distributed energy systems, a greater renewable integration, as well as an increased number of users interacting with the system. And also these, having extreme weather events exacerbates these issues. And of course, climate change being behind a lot of these events and exacerbating those issues. In today's panel, we will explore the role of transatlantic cooperation in addressing these particular issues. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our star lineup today. We have Kurt Donnelly, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Bureau of Energy Resources at the US State Department. We have Peter Dolhun, who is the CEO of Slovak Electricity Transmission System. We have Rokas Masilis, who is the Director General of Litgrid. We have Eric Klosowski, who is the CEO of Polish Power System. Lots of expertise in the room today, and we're really fortunate to have you join this panel today. Kurt, I'm going to start with you and have my first question directed at you. Why is the United States engaged in supporting electricity security in Central and Eastern Europe? And how does it exactly connect with the other pillars of the transatlantic relationship, for example, hard security and our NATO capabilities, as well as our cooperation and our work on decarbonization?
Thanks, Olga, and thanks for hosting this event. Really critical issues. Glad to be talking here. I'm a little reticent to claim that I'm an expert, given the company I'm in. I don't have the expertise on managing grids and that kind of thing that my colleagues do. But let me talk a little bit about why energy security is important to the United States. It's pretty fundamental. We have allies in Europe. And most of them are members of NATO. And because of that, we have a sovereign promise that we will mutually protect each other. Now, back when NATO was created, that had to do with more conventional forms of warfare, but we've seen that change dramatically. And our critical energy infrastructures are a vulnerable piece of our national security right now. And it is in our national interest, it is in the collective interest of us and our allies to address these issues of energy security. As you know, over the past decade or so, we focused very much on the threat to energy security coming from Russian dominance of things like natural gas supplies to Europe, nuclear energy facilities, and nuclear energy fuel, also consolidating Russia's dominance of energy markets in Central and Eastern Europe. We've done a lot to address that, but that's not the main point of this session. It is more on our electricity grids. One of the vulnerabilities that we continue to see to Russian dominance and therefore energy security of our allies and partners in Europe is connections to the Russian energy grid in the Baltics, in Ukraine, and places like that. And that is why the US government is very strongly supporting these efforts, well advanced in the Baltics, just starting out in a place like Ukraine, for our allies and partners to cut the cord to Russian power and create those links to European power grids. That sends a very, very strong sort of geopolitical message, but it also makes practical sense. These are countries that are tied deeply into the European economy European energy systems. And this is sort of one of the remaining things on the to-do list to complete that integration. And so for us, it's of vital importance. We're glad to throw our support in where we can. I'm glad to see that the European Commission has supported these efforts as well. So that's just one piece of it, but I won't take up more time.
Thank you so much, Kurt. This is very helpful context and background for the conversation today. I'm going to switch over to what is happening in Central and Eastern Europe right now and ask this question for Łukasz and Eric. The Baltic countries and Poland are embarking on unprecedented electric system transformation right now, disconnecting from the Russian rail system and synchronizing with the electricity system of the continental Europe with EU. This entails infrastructure, cyber, and market functionality challenges that will have to be overcome. Could you talk about which of these challenges you're most concerned about, but which of them present the most opportunities for transatlantic solutions and transatlantic cooperation? We'll start with Łukasz, please.
Thank you, Olga. Yes, indeed, Lithuania is going through big changes in energy, and Lithuania can be a good example of how we are solving this dependence on Russia issues. First of all, we have solved our gas dependence issues when we have opened the LNG terminal in Klaipėda. And as we see, it's functioning properly, it's fully booked. Majority of gas comes from the terminal, not from Gazprom pipe. Even American gas is already in our system. I think 2 or 3 tankers came in with Cheniere gas this year already. So this part was achieved was well executed and had enormous results, not only for Lithuania, but for all 3 Baltic states, and even Finland is buying gas from this terminal now. So we are now in stage 2, which is probably the bigger part and the more important, as you can say, is disconnecting from electricity grid and connecting to European continental network through Poland. So Eric and his team are crucial for Baltic states' task to synchronize with continental Europe, and Poland is doing a great job helping us to connect. I understand that it's a big burden for them, but there was time when Germany helped Poland to do the same thing. So now Poland does it for us, what Germany did for them many years ago. So I would say it's not only a technological construction process, but it's also almost a dash for independence, because we're not only ones dashing for the result, but Russians are dashing too. And dash goes who will be better prepared and who will be first to be prepared for this connection, because nobody knows what negotiations can be at the end of desynchronization. And ultimately, all this big project of disconnection from Russian grid is going in the light of 2 other very important events for whole Europe. One event is very important for whole Europe, that's renewable agenda, integration of large fleet of renewables, first of all, wind energy here in Lithuania. So not only we're building network to connect to Poland better, but we're also expanding network and preparing for onshore and offshore grid integration. And for Lithuania, we have specifically one more big issue, that's Astravets nuclear power plant, built right on the border with Lithuania, 40 kilometers from our capital, Vilnius, built not according to normal procedures for nuclear power plant construction. So Lithuania has taken a course to stop electricity flows to Lithuania from Belarus. That's not easy because we're still in one network, and we're talking with Latvia and Estonia how to make this happen. So even before synchronization, to stop flows from Belarusian nuclear power plant. So it's 3 big tasks we're doing at once. So it's a lot of work right now. Thank you.
a lot of urgency to get a lot of these tasks completed as well. So thank you for sharing those details. Erica, we'll go to you now, and especially if you wanted to note the Harmony link and the importance of that infrastructure in the future synchronization.
Thank you, Olga. Yes, as Roka said, we are keen supporters of ambitions of Lithuania and the Western Baltic states regarding their synchronization with continental Europe. I think we owe this to them because we have been in this fortunate situation that we have never been connected electrically to the Russian mainland. So this puts us in a very favorable situation. We have been the member of the European Continental Synchronous Area since 1994 and a very active member of ENTSO-E, the Association of the European System Operators, even prior to our accession to the European Union. At the moment, Harmony Link project is at its turnover point because we have just made investment decision. So we hope to step into the design, procurement, and engineering phase of this project early next year at the latest. And of course, the deadline in 2025 is very ambitious. However, we hope, we trust that we will meet this deadline and commence the operations of this submarine link on time.
Thank you, Eric. Peter, before we go to the next question, I want to follow up with Walker just on one important point. There are some diverging views across the Baltic region about whether interconnection to the Russian grid, as well as the Belarus nuclear power plant, are security concerns. How do we build consensus across the region on these sensitive issues to kind of have everyone moving in the same direction with the same level of enthusiasm, if you would?
Olga, is it a question for me or? Yes, thank you.
Yes, please, yes. Mm-hmm.
It's a very good question, actually. Life goes on and Lithuanian problems are not always felt by our neighbors with the same pain as we feel, for example, Astravets nuclear power plant. So I have to admit, we're still searching for a common ground with Latvia and Estonia, how to deal with this. So I would say we're in the middle of a process, which contains a lot of heated discussions, arguments, and so on and so forth. We're being even moderated by European Commission because we need moderation. It's Eric can tell you he participated in few of those, and I don't think that he's so happy to be a moderator there. But anyway, I believe that still we have one common ground to get synchronization happen, and we will make it happen. So by having and standing on a firm ground, I believe that we will put aside our quarrels, as we all know that neighbors have many things in history to quarrel about. So this is one of those. And I believe that we'll step over it and we'll achieve what we want.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. Just, a lot of complicated issues that need to be worked through, but worth discussing today. We can't really talk about grid security without mentioning cybersecurity, which will be an important part of all of these efforts. The energy systems are exposed to increased number of threats and actors and, growing attack surface. There are also vulnerabilities from interdependencies between the physical and the cyber infrastructure. Peter, could you talk about some of the cybersecurity coordination that's currently happening between Slovakia and the United States, and specifically at the level of the electricity transmission system operators? And what's happening currently, and also maybe what would you like to see happening in the future in terms of expanding those efforts?
Thank you, Olga. Good afternoon, good morning. Not sure I'm the expert to actually address what's happening between the Europe or Central Europe and the US. What I can actually share with you is our experience in the area of cyber. And we can all agree that we're actually transitioning from what my senior colleagues have been mentioning or naming as the transition from the old world, which was quite stable and predictable in terms of the modeling of the grid, planning of the management, to more agile. I'm not talking unsecure, but really fast changing in both ways. The mix of the power production or generation and the power consumption, as well as the mix of the users and the participants on the market. And that actually drives a lot of questions and the challenges in terms of the security in all aspects, the physical, the operations, as well as the cyber. And our company has actually completed recently a huge transition in our core IT systems. So imagine that one of the core systems is the system for management of the grid. And after years of research and discussion with different vendors, we actually opted for a solution that was produced and has been provided by the US manufacturer. And that gave us a quite high level of the confidence that our network after the implementation is secure to a certain level. That actually doesn't end the process, and it actually requires us to be still in contact with the community, the authorities, to really build the scenarios for the testing of our resilience of our network and the grid, and learning from the other peers. So that's to the cyber side, but it's not only the cyber security, it's really addressing all the layers of the security of the grid and the network. And with the new entrants to the market, talking about the communities, the aggregators, the distributed power generation and the consumption, the question of the cyber security, because it's not only exchanging the data about the consumption of generation for the billing and the invoicing purposes, but also for activating the service for the flexibility purpose and so on, is going to be high on our agenda.
Thank you so much. Any additional responses to the cyber conversation and some of the work, some of the cooperation that's currently happening or should be happening? Any other feedback before we move into the next questions? And I also would like to remind our audience to please start submitting your questions in the Q&A function. That way we can make sure to catch a couple of them towards the end of the session. Just want to make sure to give everyone, all the panelists, an opportunity to respond to those cyber remarks.
Olga, can I say just a couple things on that?
Please do.
I have to say that our Baltic partners were some of the first to raise the alarm about the vulnerabilities of cyber. We appreciate that. It's given us some time to prepare for these threats, maybe not completely, but we have been working on that. We have annual talks with the Baltic states about critical energy infrastructure. The State Department, through the Office of the Coordinator for Cyber Issues, leads those talks. And so those are very important. The collaboration, the sharing of threats and responses. We learn from each other. That kind of cooperation really has to continue and broaden, I believe. Also, just one other thing to note. The US government supplies funding for a Department of Energy project to provide cybersecurity and grid technical assistance to the Baltic states. So we're putting a little bit of money where our mouth is on that. Again, in view that these are our allies and that we view this as a threat, it's important that we're taking steps to address some of these vulnerabilities.
Thank you so much, Kurt. Anyone else would like to respond to this question? Or respond to this topic? Yep.
Maybe a few comments. Of course, cybersecurity is of high priority topic here in Lithuania, and we have a center of excellence in the Ministry of Defense, cybersecurity center, a very strong competent center, which regulates all the other spheres in the country. It's up-to-date training, information, and so on and so forth. So it's a really big thing. And even as to talk about Ligarit after Colonial pipeline problems, we have increased our staff in cybersecurity by 20%. But I have heard, I don't know, Eric, I believe you have something to say, because I was told that you are the best expert in this field, at least among Central European countries. Personally, if I'm not mistaken, sorry if I'm mistaken.
Thanks, Rokas. Yes, I think that our company, PSE, is a local champion in the field of cybersecurity. We have been honored by the Department of Justice, Department of Defense, and Department of Energy in 2019 to be a host of European mutation of GRIDEX annual exercises in the field of cybersecurity wars. Many guests also from Lithuania, from Baltic states, attended to these events, and I hope that exercises in 2019 were not a one-off event, and there will be some continuation thanks to efforts of PSE and our American partners.
Thank you so much. I'd like to move towards decarbonization and securing the electricity grid and talk about that. First of all, what role does the electricity grid play in our decarbonization efforts? And are there some best practices, lessons learned that we could exchange in what areas to help us secure this robust process of having a grid that has so many more renewable energy sources connected to it, a lot more consumers that are in some cases generating their own energy, a lot more distributed energy resources, smart meters and other technologies that are integrated into the households that interact with consumers. So how do we talk about these energy efficiency and clean energy technologies and grid security, and how do those two interconnect? What is the relationship between the two? Peter, let's go to you first.
I thought you wouldn't ask. and it's really complex. It's not just one way from the power generation, the new sources based on the wind, solar systems, and so on. But it's also actually our networks or our systems will be also influenced by the consumption of the industry, not only the consumers. You know, the mobility part or increasing the use of the IT and the cloud services and so on. And I believe that the exchange of the experience from the pilot projects, the proof of concepts from different regions and the markets, especially between the US and Europe, will be very vital. I can be very, very short in description of our market. In terms of our energy mix, we're quite okay if we compare ourselves with our neighbors and colleagues in Hungary, Poland, or Czech Republic. Within 2 to 3 years, we'll actually terminate the coal-based generation of the power. The majority will be nuclear, but we have the other sources as well. The question is how we can handle that in terms of the increasing consumption, because part of our decarbonization is really based on the reduction of the brown or coal-based manufacturing, be it steel, car manufacturing, and so on. And that will be very vital for us to actually learn from the countries where the transition was made from the coal-based. Let's take the example of the iron production or the steel production, how it influenced the network, the grid, and how the grid actually managed and prepared itself for the flexibility that was required. That's just one part. In terms of the smart, that's what you mentioned, we are very proud to be part of the community in the region, not only in Slovakia, but also the neighboring country, maybe Czech Republic or Hungary, where we are part of the R&D programs. And again, our teams that are involved would be more than happy to actually hear and learn from the peers from the other countries and the regions as well.
Excellent, thank you. Rokas, do you want to respond to this?
Yes, thank you. Lithuania might not be the best example here because we are on extreme in energy production. When Lithuania has joined the EU, we had to close our single nuclear power plant. That was obligation for joining EU. And suddenly we became a net importer of electricity, and we still are. We are producing only 1/3 of our needs ourselves. And that is already almost all renewables. We have a big plan to expand renewables, especially wind energy. And according to our plans, already by 2025 and by 2030, we will be a net exporter of electricity because our grid is capable, without significant investments, to absorb as much wind power and a little bit of solar as well, more than country needs. So we are already facing different tasks. Our task is to what to do with this excess electricity, and we're investing into batteries, and we're already making plans for hydrogen production. So I don't know. Currently we are net importer, but we're already preparing to become a net exporter and make benefit out of it. So thank you.
Excellent. I want to give an opportunity for Eric and Kurt to respond if you would like to, or we can move on to the next question. Just let me know.
Of course, decarbonization is a very important challenge. For instance, Poland has quintupled its installed capacity in photovoltaics over the recent 2 years. There's a big daily challenge, a day-to-day challenge to balance the system in which we have installed over 5 gigawatts in photovoltaics and about 20 gigawatts in hardcore. So everybody faces their local challenges. However, every European state faces the classical energy trilemma, a choice between decreasing carbon emissions, between providing energy security, and between securing low prices for societies and for industries. And everything occurs in highly complex regulatory environment here in the European Union. So this is another source of challenges, how to comply to very complicated, very complex rules governing system operations and markets.
Thank you so much. Kurt, did you have anything to add to this?
Maybe very briefly. I think this is, these are the right questions to ask, because as we're committed to this transition, I was struck by the IEA's report on net zero by 2050. And to get to our 2050 goals, our global energy mix will be 50% electricity. So we're concentrating so much more of the power of the energy that we use to keep our economies going is going to be through electricity, which means that it creates more and more vulnerability because the electricity will be expanded so much. It will be a more inviting target for people who want to do us harm. So these issues of energy security, cybersecurity, those kinds of things become even more important because in our electricity grids, because they're becoming more and more important and integrated into every aspect of of our economy. We talked a little bit about heavy industry and moving away from coal or other hydrocarbons. I mean, these are fundamental issues. We're all trying to address them as quickly as we can, but there is sort of a 2050 deadline for us to solve all these issues. So I applaud the discussion we're having today, and always interested to learn more.
Thank you, Kurt. Both of you mentioned regulatory issues and regulations, and I think it's really worth a follow-up question there. Where are we, in terms of in the United States, but then also in Central and Eastern Europe and some countries in that region? Have the regulations caught up to the dynamic electricity environment that we're in right now, and especially in the cybersecurity issues? In many ways, the private sector has led on cybersecurity solutions because a lot of times they are responsible for the financial losses of the cybersecurity threats. So my question to you is, where can this private-public partnerships work really great together? What does that look like? And then also those private-public partnerships across the Atlantic, that transatlantic cohesion, and to get that regulatory environment to be more responsive to the current state of the electricity market and electricity systems. Eric, we'll start with you this time. If you have something, of course.
Actually, I feel there are two parts of the questions. The first is the public-private partnership in general, in both the legislation or regulatory, as well as the standardization in the market, and then the cybersecurity aspects. I'm sure that both my colleagues, Eric and Rokas, would confirm that besides managing our grids, we are in very intense discussion with our regulators and the authorities, as well as the other players on the market, in terms of designing and shaping the legislation and regulation for the upcoming term. In Slovakia, our new regulation term starts in 23 and should be and shall be based on application of the winter packages, as well as the clean energy package from Europe, which actually defines the entities, the roles, the obligations, as well as the rights of consumers and the producers. So without very close discussion and the partnership between all parties included, but not only on the national level, but also the international, we're not going to catch up, and we're not going to be able to actually stand up and say we did our job well and the market is ready. And that applies also to cybersecurity. I can share the experience in our country, but also in the region. I believe that the cybersecurity has been the issue that both the public sector as well as the private have been addressing for more than 1 decade. And the result is that our public authorities are actually paying a lot of attention to setting up the framework, the standards, as well as the regulation. And that applied to the companies like ours. It's actually helping us not to be sitting on around the table with in the comfort zone, but to have the level of the confidence that we really have the basis and the basic homework done, and we can actually build on that in terms of addressing the new challenges coming. What Kurt actually mentioned as well, the new entrants, the new participants on the market connected to the grid. Either the distribution system or the transmission system will be also sort of the backdoor for the parties that would be willing to take advantage of the system and make us harm. That's just quoting Kurt. And that's exactly what we need to do. And it's not the individual role of a company like ours. It's not a role of the small number of the players, but the whole community, including the public sector.
Thank you. Let's go to Eric if you have something to add on this topic.
I agree totally with Peter. Of course, public-private partnership is a must within our business. State-owned grid operators, grid owners, and private-owned generators, but also our suppliers, our vendors of IT solutions, of IT hardware and IT software. That's right. everything relies upon trust, mutual trust between us as a public actor and those private actors within the market.
Thank you, Eric. Kurt, anything to add to this?
No, not especially. I'm not expert on this, but
Gotcha.
I think it is normally regulation sort of follows technological advances. And so our challenge is to keep government regulation on pace with the enormous changes in our electricity grids and introducing renewables and cyber threats and all of that. Unfortunately, it hits the news when we don't do that quite well. The shutdown of our grid in Texas is an example of that, where we need to do better. But it is, in fact, a real partnership. The public sector recognizes it, and our private companies do too, that we need each other. It's not often that public companies want to be regulated, private companies want to be regulated, but here they recognize that this is fundamentally important for their survival, their ability to operate and to provide secure, stable energy for us.
Thank you, Kurt. Rokas, anything to add?
Maybe a few things. Here in Lithuania, probably this issue is not as big as in other countries because most of energy assets are in government hands. So one way or another, there is one coordinator who is leading the show, and it's much easier to solve issues and to make everybody prepared equally. So if government leads the way, then problems are solved, at least here in Lithuania.
Got it. Thank you so much. For our final question, I'd love to go around the room and get your thoughts on, the current taking stock of the current initiatives that are out there to work on electricity issues, cybersecurity issues, grid security issues. Of course, we have the US-EU Energy Council, we have the 3Cs initiative, we have PTEC, Clean Energy Ministerial, a lot of really fantastic groups already in place. My question to you is, are these mechanisms sufficient? Are they enough? Or do we specifically need to think about something new that's just very specifically focused on this area and launching that type of cooperation, or including it into one of the, making sure that it's properly integrated into some of the initiatives that I've mentioned. And of course, some of these initiatives already have it explicitly listed, like PTEC has a working group on this. Kurt, I'm going to start with you because I think it's relevant as, the Biden administration is taking stock of the inherited initiatives from the previous administration and looking into what to extend, what makes sense under the new priorities under the Biden administration. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, and then we'll go around the room to the other panelists.
Thanks, Olga. You're right. We're still in this intensive period of sort of assessing all of our interactions, all of our policies. There have been some huge fundamental changes in our policy in the United States and how we then make this work most effectively and best. Starting with the US-EU Energy Council, I think there's broad consensus within the US government that this continues to be a positive forum. Unfortunately, we really haven't had much interaction in this forum in the last 2 years. That's time lost. In that time, we have a new commission, we have the European Green Deal, all of these enormous developments on that side of the Atlantic, and we haven't been as engaged. We're going to make up for that. So there's ambitious conversations going on now about how we can renew this cooperation, renew this consultation, but also reorient it in important ways. So the US-EU Energy Council was set up in 2009, I believe, under very different circumstances. It has to be able to adjust, to focus on the priorities, to focus on the threats and the opportunities that all of this presents. So that's really important. We're doing that now. Fora like this really help us understand, are we doing this properly? And we'll look for more guidance on that. 3Cs initiative, again, a really fundamental initiative initiated by countries in the region, not by the EU, not by the United States, but we really do support the goals of the 3Cs initiative. I think that it will require a little bit of a step back to make sure that those goals are addressed in the proper way. that we're leveraging finance and other tools we have to achieve our goals. But it is fundamentally the energy security of Central and Eastern Europe that we're talking about. So it's right in the middle of this conversation. And then just more broadly, I think the renewed cooperation globally that this administration wants to emphasize, and that starts with Europe. I mentioned before, we have a treaty obligation to defend our allies in Europe. We have incredibly strong and cooperative economic cooperation and ties. Those we want to develop. We see the European Green Deal and our climate policies in the United States as largely complementary. We want to find ways to make those work together. So together we can do more than we would do separately in our own economies, but also as we influence and accelerate ambition around the world to address our climate change goals and also to address these fundamental issues of energy security. We come from very advanced economies. There are underdeveloped economies that are going to have to deal with these same issues of grid security, cybersecurity, and they're going to need help from us and other international organizations to accomplish that. So I think our institutions are in pretty good shape. That doesn't mean that we don't need to take a fundamental look at this, and there may be a need to create new subsets under existing institutions or create something new. But right now, I think we're going to use what we have and move forward with that.
I like that. Rokas, what do you think about this issue?
Thank you, Olga. Yes, of course, there are always a number of ways to cooperate. And if we would talk about cybersecurity, there is a partnership for transatlantic energy cooperation. There are also technological cooperations, not to mention that our LNG terminal was constructed, designed by Americans. And I remember I participated in that project as well. I remember when we picked companies which would help us to construct. We handpicked Americans just because we thought they are more reliable than others, and that paid off ultimately. So technological help, I would even say moral help or support in your actions are very important. When it comes to electricity, in here probably a bigger leverage is on EU, because EU is financing most of the projects. So it's a big help from European Commission, from EU with finances. For example, our synchronization is up to 70% financed by EU. So that's why it's so fast and so quick, considering the size of the project. So there are a lot of ways to cooperate, and we always feel this cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Eric?
Of course, security relies upon cooperation. For instance, within this cybersecurity business, sharing knowledge about vulnerabilities, about threats requires strong, robust cooperation at as much levels as possible. At the level of government cooperation, at the level of companies cooperation, at the level of industrial lobbies cooperation, so on and so on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll go to Peter.
I'm afraid I have nothing to add after Rokas and Eric on the cybersecurity. In general, if you come back to I think the previous question about the regulation and about the new market design, I believe there's a lot of space for the cooperation, exchange of the ideas and experience. Having the think tanks that could actually address different issues from the market design through the regulation and the implication in all layers, the physical, financial, as well as the cyber. And we would be more than happy to partner and participate both ways to actually benefit from the discussion, but also to contribute by our experience and by our knowledge. Would be our pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. I want to give you 10 seconds for any last minute remarks or anything else that you wanted to mention before we close the panel. We'll just have another minute left. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity. If there's anything else that you wanted to add.
I wanted to thank you for the opportunity, and I really look forward to catching up with you guys in the future.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to all of you for participating. We really appreciate you having you on this panel and be a part of this really timely and important discussion. I would like to encourage our audience to please join us for the next panel, Cities on the Front Lines of Energy Transition, which will start immediately right after this panel. And our events team will also post a link to it to make it easier for you to access it. This session will also be available on the Atlantic Council website, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you for joining, everyone, and thank you to our audience for tuning in today. Take care.